Next on AM 1480 WLEA, the Newsmaker Show. Here's Brian O'Neill.
Always glad to have with us Corning Republican Congressman Tom Reed. Normally our Tuesday guest is Dr. Gary Ostrower. Dr. Ostrower went on Monday's show so we could have the Congressman with us today. Congressman Reed, thanks for joining us.
Oh, it's great to be with you, Brian. Hope everyone's having a great summer.
Well, Congressman Tom Reed, so many questions for you. Let's start out with this one. Yesterday, you were at the State Trooper Nick Clark dedication. So many people have so many great memories of Nick Clark, all around really nice guy. Died in that terribly tragic domestic incident in the town of Irwin in early July of last year. Your thoughts there on the dedication yesterday?
Well, obviously it was a somber event, and it was great to see the family and be with the family. And, you cannot believe that it's just over a year ago that Nick Clark gave his life for all of us as he stood on the blue line and stood with his fellow men and women in law enforcement like they do each and every day. And he paid the ultimate sacrifice for all of us. And to have that dedication of his sign on I-86 and the Route 415 bridge is something, hopefully, that we can show our support for not only Nick Clark and his family, but for all the men and women in law enforcement. And also, as I said yesterday, Nick Clark's continuing to serve. He served us while he was on Earth, and now his name is now depicted. And there's going to be many moments, and I've had them in my own car traveling on the road at various points where, you look at your kids and they're like, well, who was that guy? Who was Devin Schneider? Who was Nicholas Clark? And then that will give us a chance to inspire that next generation with true mentors such as Nick Clark. And that's a testament to his family, the kind of guy he is and was. And I'll just tell you, opportunity to continue to serve the community by using his life that he gave on that day on July 2nd.
Water bucketing, the New York City Police. You came out against that very strongly, and you talked about how the anti-police rhetoric is not helping things.
Not at all. I mentioned it again just yesterday, and I'll just tell you, to see the men and women of blue attacked and the vile attacks that I see on social media with, this throwing water, throwing buckets at the men and women in law enforcement, to do what? What message are you sending to your fellow American citizen when you do that? That you think law enforcement is not worthy of our praise and our respect? I just find it appalling, and I find elected officials that are taking us down this path of attacking law enforcement and are proud to do it. I mean, I just look at Mayor de Blasio and his whole administration in New York City right now. It's PD. I just don't get it, and I'll be a loud voice to stand with the men and women in law enforcement and say thank you for your service, thank you for standing up for all of us to keep us safe, and we're going to have your back as an elected official to say, if somebody does this to you, throws water on you, attacks you with a bucket, then you know what? You should be prosecuted at the federal level for either a hate crime or there's special provisions in the law that say when law enforcement is attacked, you got severe penalties that need to be imposed on you. And for all those DAs and elected officials that want to stand with the folks that are throwing water on our cops, I say shame on you. What I'm going to do is stand with our men and women in blue and say thank you, and we're going to stand and protect you as best we can under the laws of our country.
Gun control. The push for gun control has been on again the last 3 weeks since the shootings in El Paso and Dayton. I can hear the reporters, a couple of them anyway, on your weekly press calls asking you lots of questions and pushing the envelope with you on your views on gun control. You stood your ground on that. Your thoughts and on gun control and your thoughts on the president's stance.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that response or commentary on our press call. I think sometimes those press calls you can see some true colors of folks coming through, but at the end of the day, they're reporters, and I respect that, and they have their right to an opinion just like everyone else. But we're going to stand on the Second Amendment. It's a fundamental right. It is something that's guaranteed by the Second Amendment under the Constitution, and that freedom is something I proudly support and remain in strong support of. And, there's not a member of Congress, nor is a person in America that doesn't want to do something about gun violence. And so what I try to do is I try to make sure that my position on the Second Amendment is known, but I'm willing to stay in the room. And if you want to go after the who solutions, is what I call them, the non-law-abiding citizen, like a criminal defendant who's been previously convicted of a weapons charge, who then rightfully loses their Second Amendment right and then be sanctioned for potentially violating that in the future, going after the psychopathically ill individuals to get them the help they need, and also, most importantly, protect in society by having mechanisms in law so that they don't have access to a firearm after they have a right to a hearing. I think that is the hard work that needs to be done on this issue, and that is something that I think can get some common ground, bipartisan support to try to implement. But what I hear out of these shootings is sometimes elected officials using it to reignite the same battles that have been played time and time again, where banning assault weapons, banning ammunition, banning XYZ, the what solutions is what I call them. Let's focus on the real cause of the problem. That is the person behind the gun. And if you get to the person behind the gun, I think, and you focus on those solutions, you may be able to bring people together to do what we can to try to mitigate these events from happening in the future.
Do you see an increase in metal detectors in, I don't know, schools, public places? Do you see an increase in metal detectors as being a possible answer?
I don't know if necessarily that is going to be one of the solutions. I mean, that's something obviously to consider. Just as we have I have strong support for our school resource officers. Having law enforcement, community policing in our schools, I think, is a wise policy, and it's good to try to break what it seems to be this attack on law enforcement. I had somebody at the town hall who was like, "Why would you want to put police officers in our schools?" I go, "Because our most precious asset exists in our schools, our kids. And why wouldn't you want a police officer there who can develop a relationship, and people would look to the officer, like they should, as the good guy, not as what some in the press and some of these hard left extremists on the Democratic Party now that are trying to label law enforcement as bad guys." That to me is where we potentially could go, and I think metal detectors, people policing in our community. I mean, that is something I think most people could support, and could be part of the solution. But let's be very clear, though. If you don't get to the who, and you just focus on the what, and metal detectors focuses on the what, I don't think are going to really move the needle on these situations. You got to get to the person behind the weapon, and those that are either criminally predisposed or who are psychopathic in their mental illness condition. That is where I think the heart of the conversation can maybe gain some traction to get something done.
Talking this morning live with Congressman Tom Reed. Congressman, the direction the Dems are going in with Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the squad. You've always done the bipartisan thing, especially with the Problem Solvers Caucus. I was wondering if the influence of AOC and the squad, all being farther to the left, does it make it more difficult to be bipartisan? And what do the Problem Solvers members think of the squad?
Yeah, no, I think anytime. I mean, what unites us as Problem Solvers Caucus is that we're proud Republicans, proud Democrats, but we're committed to being pragmatic. We're committed to staying in the room and finding that common ground. And what AOC and the squad, quote-unquote, represent is that extremism on the left that is overtaking the Democratic Party. And does that make it more difficult for these Democratic members to lead by being pragmatic, by trying to get to solutions where 80% is a victory, not a defeat? Yes. And the same thing happens on the right. There's some purist, if you would, on the hard right that sometimes attack us for trying to find this common ground. But what I believe is that the silent majority of voice of Americans say, you know what, we're proud conservatives, we're proud liberals, but at the end of the day, we're Americans first, and what we're going to do is stay in the room to find common ground to solve our problems as a nation. And that's my makeup. That's what my mindset is. And when I see this extremism taking over the Democratic Party, I'm concerned. This is not the Democratic Party of your grandpa or your grandma. This is a very extreme Democratic Party And you don't have to look any further than Albany, New York City, to see the leadership of the Democratic Party that is just being swept into this extreme left position on each and every item that comes down the pipeline.
I don't think we've had you on for a one-on-one interview since your visit to the border detention center in McAllen, Texas. Senator Schumer and Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez were very critical of the border detention centers. You came away with a different view, though, of what you saw at the border.
Absolutely did. What I saw with the public commentary by Senator Schumer and the AOC when they visited was, political pandering, not leadership. What I saw was this narrative that they're trying to reinforce, that these facilities are inhumane and that border security guards are out there abusing children. And I just got to tell you, that's not the case. What we have is a crisis at the border. The crisis is caused by the broken immigration laws that Congress is responsible for. Not to anyone else, Congress. So Congress should lead on these issues and solve this issue, and that's where we're putting together proposals on immigration that we came together in the Problem Solvers Caucus last session on a compromise position to get our border functioning and make sure it's secure, but make sure it's functioning so that you don't have these tens of thousands of people coming through the broken immigration system, clogging up in facilities that are not designed to handle tens of thousands of people showing up at the doorstep. And if you fix the root cause of the issue, which is the broken immigration laws, then this type of situation, this crisis situation on the border, I think will be mitigated, and it will be handled in a much more effective way. But, to go down there and blame border agents, to blame these facilities as child abuse facilities is just not accurate. These guys are doing the best they can. These men and women at the border are doing the best they can with the situation at hand. And what I saw was a operation that was trying to handle it in a very humane way and making sure that they're doing their job first and foremost, which is to protect us as American citizens, and then do the best they can with what they have. And what I will continue to say is, we'll stand ready to work with anyone to fix this issue, and it needs to be fixed because this crisis isn't going away. And let's be very clear too, Brian. This didn't happen under the Trump administration. This happened under the Obama administration. It's happened under this President Trump administration. And so the commonality there is the cause of the problem is Congress. Congress needs to act, and I'd be more than willing to take that leadership mantle if the other spineless political leaders want to play political pandering games with this in perpetuity.
The whole drinking out of toilets story, which I think it was that was broken by AOC. I heard one explanation for that there are these, I guess I'll call them units, toilets that are connected to sinks. You have the sink at the top, the toilet down on the floor, and that's what they were talking about. Did you want to weigh in on that one?
Yeah, I mean, this is just, again, political pandering by these extremists that aren't really interested in solving the problem. They just want to score political points. And so what I saw, I did not see any of that type of condition. Obviously, you got facilities that are crowded. You got facilities that are overwhelmed because they're not designed for these tens of thousands of people showing up. So when you see that, there is a human reaction of, why is this happening? Why do we have all these people in facilities that are overwhelmed? And, that goes back to the point of it being a broken immigration system that needs to be fixed by Congress. And so when you talk about these inhumane situations, it does get me a little bit worked up because, to me, that's all about political headlines, political pandering, not recognizing the root cause of the problem, and then also not wanting to lead on the issue. And leading on the issue doesn't mean, we're not going to have a border. We're just going to open the borders and sing Kumbaya. I know a lot of people in the 60s that are now in positions of power, and that's what their mindset is wrapped around, that if we just sit around and hold hands and sing Kumbaya, that life goes in a much better direction. I live in the real world, Brian, and I will tell you, I'd love to have that utopic world that exists, but that's just not reality. And the reality is we want a vibrant American immigration system. We want immigrants to enjoy the American opportunity, the American dream. That's what's made us strong for generations is our rich diversity. But at the end of the day, you need to recognize there are bad folks that are involved in this situation. You got cartels that are making billions of dollars off the drug, weapons, and human trafficking that at the border. We should unite against those bad individuals and make sure that they're held fully accountable while we embrace the true immigrant that wants to come to America to better their lives or their children's lives.
The Jerusalem Post, I get their emails. They sent out an email this morning saying that Congresswoman Tlaib and Omar are hinting at wanting to cut funding to Israel. Now, this news follows the reports of the two members of the House not being allowed originally to go to Israel. Then the Israeli government said, okay, you can come. And then one of them said they wanted to go see their mother. And then the Congresswoman canceled that, even though she said she wanted to go to be able to go see her mother. The idea of cutting funding to Israel, do you see that going anywhere?
No, I two individuals would support cutting the foreign aid funding to Israel because they're opposed to Israel. I know their position. Their position has been very clear. They support the boycott, divestiture, sanctions movement in America to take on Israel and try to take Israel down. So it doesn't surprise me that that's their position.
Congressman Reed, I have a question for you there. Critics of Israel say that Israel gets the biggest amount of money from the United States. But is it not true that a lot of the countries in Europe and countries throughout the world are funding Israel's enemies?
There's a lot of that money flowing in also to Israel's enemies. And, you just look at their neighbors there in the area. And, to say we're going to turn our back on Israel is something I don't see happening in Congress, and that's good. But you're going to see this voice rise up of this extremism represented by these two members of the squad in particular that want to take Israel down. And from my perspective, we'll let the chips fall where they may, but I'm going to stand on the side of our relationship with Israel because it's the right thing to do. They're a good friend. They're a good ally, and we should not send the signal that we're turning our back on them.
Well, Congressman Tom Reed, coming to a close here, we get to talk usually once a week on your weekly press calls. It's a little bit more rare that we have you on for these one-on-one sessions, although I enjoy them a lot, and it would be great to get you on even more often. The press calls, I do have to say, Congressman, you handle the press so well, and our listeners hear this in the press calls. I'm not sure that other members of the House or Senate have as many press calls as you do, or that they would tolerate the constant criticism that you get from some of the reporters. So hats off to you, Congressman, in allowing all that.
Well, that means the world to me. I appreciate that, Brian. I do believe that's the role of us as a representative, and I'm willing to put ourselves out there because to represent people, you got to listen to people and you got to take the criticism. But we know who we are. We know what we stand for. We're always going to be straight with the folks we represent. But we'll do the hard work of showing up in the arena because that's what I think it is to be a representative, and we're committed to doing that.
Out of time today, we've been talking with Corning Republican Congressman Tom Reed. Congressman, as always, thank you so much for coming on.
That's great to be with you, Brian. Enjoy the rest of the summer. Have a good time.
Great. It's AM 1480 WLEA Hornell. Stay with us for the Brian Kilmeade Show.